and they were sited slightly further back by around 2 meters, closer to the boundary fence. So there's only 8 meter separation distance between the rear elevation of the properties and the boundary fence. So that's the front elevation of the house proposed, no issue in relation to it. And the rear elevation, then you can see now the applicant is suggesting a change to the elevation that was approved. So you'll still have the ground floor door and patio doors, but you'll have no windows on the rear elevation. You'll have 2 Velux windows then in the roof, which you can see on the screen. And on the side elevation, then you'll have the ground floor windows and the first floor windows then into the property. Internally then, members, you can see then the floor plan on the left. As you come in the front door, you have a hall, dining, kitchen and living room on the ground floor. And then you go up the stairs and you have the 3 bedrooms, the master bedroom, bedroom 2 and bedroom 3, and then the bathroom. And it's the properties at the top of the slide, or the elevation at the top of the slide is obviously a critical one. So it's bedroom 3 and the bathroom. So you can see there on the screen, that's the elevation now that's proposed on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side, you can see the internal footprint of the floor plan of the building. And the red line, as I say, is the elevation facing the neighbours. So you can see bedroom 3 with no window at the back, but there'll be a window on the side. And the bathroom then will have a Velux window. And then just as a comparison, so you can see the approved plans. The 626 is the approval on the right-hand side, and the 929 then is what's proposed. So obviously the movement of the 2 properties closer to the existing properties next door has had a change in the impact upon those properties. So the closest 2 neighbours are 26 and you have 28A as well. I'll just show you a slide from them. So if we go to 26, that's the view then from the objectives property. These are the actual objectives photographs. And you can see the location of the building in the relationship to their house. And then the right-hand slide is obviously a view from their kitchen window. You can see the sink, and that's the view from the, just go back a couple slides. So from 28A, so if you look over, you can see if you're standing in 28A and you're looking out their back garden towards the 2 properties, that's the views in that property has submitted in objection to the application. So members, you'll note from the report then the recommendation is to refuse planning permission. The reason for the refusal then is that the proposal is contrary to criteria H of QD1 in that the proposal will have an unacceptable adverse impact on the residential amenity of neighbouring properties through dominance and overbearing impact.
Okay, members, we do have speaking rights in respect to this application. We have Miss Lorraine Mccann on behalf of the objectors. We also have Mr. Eden Kelly, agent, and Councillor Barrett Wilson and Councillor Anne-Marie Fitzgerald in support of the objectors. So we do have at this point 10 minutes for a representation by the agent. So I'd invite Mr. Kelly to go ahead in his own time. I'll keep an eye on the time and maybe flag up when we've approaching 9 minutes. You're very welcome, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. I trust you can hear me okay?
Can indeed, yeah.
Right. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members. The single reason for refusal on this file relates to dominance and the perceived overbearing impact. The original case officer's report for the file referred to overlooking and not to dominance. In an attempt to address the overlooking issue, the applicant removed the windows on the upper floor back wall of the proposed dwellings and moved them to the side of each respective dwelling. Upon receipt of the amended drawings, officers changed the reasoning for refusal to dominance and overbearing impact. The most important aspect of this proposal is the fact that the applicant has mistakenly built the houses 2 metres further back on the site. He acknowledges his mistake and has lodged the planning application to regularize the application and ceased work on the properties. When assessing the potential impact of the proposal on neighbouring dwellings, we must make that the assessment is based on the existing approved set of detached dwellings on the site. This is particularly important when assessing dominance. Officers in their presentation tonight and in the case officer report have reference to the view of number 26 Retreat Heights, which is located directly behind the proposed development. Officers assess that the proposal will have a dominant and overbearing impact and use this as a reason for refusal. However, the applicant would question whether this has been considered in context of the existing approval on the site. When viewed from the rear of number 26 and the adjoining properties at Retreat Height, the building will be almost identical to that which is already approved. There is an 8-metre garden to the rear of the proposed dwellings and an 8-metre garden to the rear of number 26. This means that the proposed dwellings is situated 16 metres from back window of number 26. If the application is unsuccessful and the applicant will be forced to return to the previous approval, and therefore there will continue to be a set of detached dwellings located 18 metres from the back window of number 26. However, the approved buildings will have windows on the upper rear elevations as per the approved plans. In this context, one must question the logic in refusing this regularization application in favour of the existing approval, which is 2 metres further away and includes windows at the upper floor overlooking number 26. The applicant wishes to make it clear that he is willing to provide meaningful planting or landscaping works to the rear of the proposed dwellings in order to soften the level of impact on the existing residents at Retreat Heights, and has agreed to meet the officers on site to discuss ways and means of aiding this process. Please note that this developer has been developing in the area for over 30 years and providing a number of quality homes for the wider Omagh area. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kelly. There's an opportunity now for members of the committee if they have any questions for the agent while we have him online here. As per the protocol, so anyone has any questions, just signal now. Okay, it looks like we have nobody indicating at this point. So in that case, I'd thank you, Mr. Kelly, for your address in the committee.
Thank you.
And we'll move on to Miss Lorraine Mccann, who wants to speak on behalf of the objectors. And just to advise that we have 5 minutes allocated for this part of the meeting. So if you are ready to go, I will alert you when you approach sort of 4 minutes. So you're very welcome, Ms. McCann, and go ahead in your own time.
Thank you. You can definitely hear me, yeah?
Yep, we can. We hear you fine, thanks.
Okay. So my name is Lorraine Mccann. I'm here with my husband, Kieran. We've been living in Retreat Heights for 8 years. We bought our house from the Monaghan's in 2014. I'm sure they will agree that there was no issues in us buying our family home. It's a 4-bedroom detached house with front and back garden. It's the very top of our budget and one that we're still paying off. We never believed in 2014 when we bought the house that we would be facing this nightmare. We were always aware that there would be houses built in the area at the back of our home. We have chosen to live in a residential area for the close, convenient amenities of Omagh town and for the community feel that an area like Retreat can provide and does provide for our family. We sold our family home in Belfast to move to a quieter country area, and this has now been a huge mistake. The impact that this has had on myself, my family, and my marriage has been terrible. My own mental health and well-being has been shattered, and the financial worry for the future is awful. We have been looking at a constant building site now for nearly 6 years. Constant noise, burning, digging, that has just gone on and on. We are aware and in agreement that these plans were breached and the builders have positioned these houses too close to mine with a significant shift to the left and not following the approved plans. We believe that the original plans that were passed, that there was a presumption that our home was on a height and that our gardens were a lot longer than they should, that they are. The houses are 16 metres away from my back door, and I'm sure you've noted from the photos and in my objections and from our neighbours, completely parallel with my house and garden boundary. They are like a mirror image. I am now the only house in both developments that is completely overlooked by 2 other houses. We believe this is unacceptable. Our privacy is gone, light is gone, sun is gone. Are we not entitled to the privacy and amenities that the documents creating places, planning policy and planning for sustainable development say that we should have? I know the panel will not consider financial loss. I have talked to local estate agents and they are clear in saying that the amount of interest in our home from potential buyers would drop significantly, and the price as well. We have invested money in our home and especially our garden. This is my family's only investment, our one and only pot of money. The developers will continue to build more houses. I am sad to say that I hate it here now. I get up in the morning, feel sick in my own kitchen, looking at this monstrosity, feel sick in my garden and out playing with my daughter. I don't have visitors anymore because of the pure embarrassment. I can see every part of these houses from all rooms at the back of my house, upstairs and down. They really do have to be seen to be believed. I am aware that they are unfinished houses, but no amount of paint will take away what has been built here. Every person who has come and stood in my kitchen, councillors, staff from planning, estate agents, neighbours, friends and family, have all stated their shock and disgust at the closeness of these houses. Many wanted to speak here today, but as I only have 5 minutes, I felt it was best I did it myself. My neighbours now and myself have put in 3 objection letters, and there seems to be no end to this. And now these new plans suggest removing all the windows from the rear of these houses, so we will be potentially looking at a brick wall. Is this just not a glaring admittance that these houses are simply too close if they have to remove all the windows? Planning have recommended that these houses are refused for a very good reason, and I really hope the panel does too. If this was a mistake, an oversight, incompetence, myself and neighbours should not have to pay the price. This was someone else's mistake. It isn't as much as the financial loss, but the loss of our quality of life, long evenings in the garden, welcoming friends and family. This is now all gone from us, and the potential to extend our downstairs in the future has been removed as well. I'm not here to try and make things difficult for anyone, but will continue to fight what was right for my family. More houses are planned on this site, townhouses, and I speak here on behalf of my other neighbours to please ask for these to be reviewed. I wouldn't want this to happen to any other family. This at times has felt like a one-man band where I've nearly thrown in the towel on many occasions because of my health. My marriage and my family have suffered, but I've always known that this was wrong and remain hopeful that the right decision will be made here today. Would you be happy with this outside your home? Happy at the loss of privacy? Happy at the loss financially? We do not want to move out of our family home, but we were left with no choice. We simply cannot envisage a future with these houses so close. The oppressive, suffocating feeling is overwhelming at times. I left an open invitation in all my objections for decision makers to please visit my home to see this for yourself. That still stands. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McCann. You're just inside the 5 minutes, so thanks for time and your contribution. Do we have any questions for the objector at this point? Nobody is indicating, so in that case, I thank you for speaking to the committee this morning.
Thank you.
And moving on to the next part of our agenda, and that is to allow contribution from councillors. We have two councillors, Councillor Bert Wilson and Councillor Anne-Marie Fitzgerald has sent in written communication. So if Councillor Wilson is happy, we would read out Councillor Fitzgerald's and then allocate the rest of the 5 minutes to yourself. If that's okay, Councillor Wilson?
Chair, that's fine, but I was of the opinion, and in fact I was told that I had 5 minutes for us, the only one that had actually had speaking rights.
No problem. Just to confirm, that's fine. Yeah, that'll be fine, Councillor.
That's
So
okay.
I'll just address Councillor Fitzgerald's communication here. So statement by Councillor Fitzgerald. I've been to Retreat Heights and I was invited into the neighbour's kitchen. I was aghast when out of the kitchen dinette windows, all I could see was a concrete building the width of the house with windows having full access. This family home, bedrooms, kitchens, dinette, and their outdoor space is completely overlooked. At the back of the house, there is no privacy. It will have a negative impact on the family and their lifestyle. Poor lighting was also an issue raised along with where the position of an oil tank boiler would be situated. The inevitable environmental noise from the two gardens, which are the full length of the objector's house. I support the neighbours objecting to these two houses as they are impacted in many ways. These people have been upfront and acknowledged that they always knew there would be houses behind them, but not as close as they are. The developer has shown no regard for their existence or the impact of these dwellings. The amendments only reinforce that this is wrong and that it can't be made right as built or altered. Significant work needs to be done, and the very least would be to revert back to what was originally granted, with a significant belt of attractive deciduous bushes along the rear boundaries. The amendments suggested are wholly unacceptable and would have an even greater dominating impact. What is currently offered as a replacement plan is an even greater visually negative impact on the objectors. Whilst what is on offer is a huge concrete wall, planning policy for the new development and for development in existing residential areas calls for due regard to be had in both provision and protection of private residential amenity space as shown, and this application does neither and should be refused. I hope my submission will be read out, okay, as she's been unable to attend. Okay, so that's from Councillor Anne-Marie Fitzgerald in support of the objectors. And now, Councillor Wilson, you're very welcome.
Yes,
I'd welcome you to go ahead in your own time, Councillor.
Yes. Well, obviously this building was not built as to planning specifications. What you are being asked to decide is, with a few tweaks and alterations, do you believe it can change what is on the ground? I do not believe that is possible. I visited this site on a very bright summer morning last year, and at 11 o'clock the lights were on, and I had visited a few of those houses, and the lights were on in the houses as the shade of the house was really black, darkening them out. And can a few tweets here and there really bring this site up to the proper standard? McCanns are also families, and when they look out of their upstairs window, they would be, in my opinion, looking into the glass doors in the kitchen on the ground floor of the proposed dwelling. If they look out, if the family had, and this would have a barbecue, if they were out sunbathing in the garden, is McCann's to blame then, because they're really overlooking the garden in the back of that dwelling. I believe that this leaves them in a very awkward position. If this site is allowed to remain, it sends out a very poor recommendation to the general public, who believe that these that the specifications are for to agree to, not to ignore. An established residential areas proposals for housing development will not be permitted where they would result in unacceptable damage to the local environment, local character, or residential amenities of areas that will be expected to conform of criteria 9H. It states that design and layout will not create or conflict with adjacent land uses and have an unacceptable adverse effect on existing or proposed properties in terms of overlooking, loss of light, overshadowing, noise, or disturbance. In my opinion, this building breaks all these regulations, and the families in these houses, the residents did not create this problem, and they do not need it either. And I wonder as well about the small roof lights that have been put in or proposed to put in this other house. Will the residents there be able to look out of those and look down into McCann's garden and that? I believe that a few tweets here and there, or in fact any changes that are proposed or that do not cure the problem that has been created not by the residents but by the misuse, and the site being moved doesn't help it either. 2 meters of what was on the previous plans. So that chair is, I do not see any answer to the question out of the tweets and proposals that are put forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor, and you kept well within the time. So at this point, I'm now going to invite our planning officers for any comments that they may have.
No members, just happy to take questions.
Okay, Councillor Deehan.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I wonder if Darren wouldn't mind putting up some of the photographs again, just regarding the massing effect and the impact.
So this is from number 26, members. This is Ms. McCann's house, number 26. So you're looking at the back of her property along the blue arrow, looking towards the yellow star. That's the view there. And the other one then from 28A, which is another objector who provided photographs. So on the right-hand side, you can see looking at the back of their property, the blue arrow, looking towards the yellow star. That's the view from their rear amenity space.
Chair, is that a fence or a retaining wall?
Just a fence.
Just a fence, yeah. Chair, could I just ask the planning officer in terms of the 2 meters, is it his opinion that moving the building closer to the barrier fence by 2 meters, that does in fact have a significant impact on light?
Just to go back to so in terms of members, just in terms of the light, the impact from the light, you're looking at the difference in space between the two properties. So you can see the two of them there, number 25 and 27, and then the existing properties. The light issue is not a significant issue for planning officers. There is sufficient gap between the two in the view of officers that the light can still get in between the properties with the angle of the sun, the orientation, etc. There's no loss of light to the amenity of the properties. It's purely down to the overbearing impact of dominance, which is that's what the neighbours will be looking at. So you'll be looking at that solid block wall. So as I say, the issue of light is not a reason for refusal or an issue that planners are raising here today. Members are entitled, though, that they may have a different view to that.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Chair. It's really an allied question, and I'm going to sort of ask it of Darren. Darren, I see this as, is this a regularisation application, basically? Is this coming out of enforcement?
Yes, it's a regularisation. So there's also, they're looking to retain the building, but as part of the application, there are amendments to the building. So just be clear, members, that's what's being constructed. So you can see the two windows in each of the semi-detached properties on the first floor. So those will not be retained, but the building will be retained as it's constructed, more or less, just finished off. And the slide on the left then is how the house will be finished.
Right.
So just to be clear.
Could I suggest, basically, because this is really a continuation of a previous bigger application, that maybe some learning comes out of this in regard to working closer together, both planning officials and building control officials. Building control obviously would have inspected the fines, but it's not part of their remit to actually then check against approved plans necessarily in regard to boundary issues. It is up to our planning officials within your remit to ensure that everything is carried out in regard to stamped approved plans. So maybe in the future, particularly as this is more a critical issue coming forward, that part of the learning may be a bit more interaction, particularly in large developments, that building control maybe work with a checklist that we try and alleviate problems before they become problems, so we could actually do something. And I know there's no statutory responsibility in regard to building control doing that, but I think in instances like this, it would be best practice as they both come under the control of the council. That, and I know close cooperation does happen, but maybe we need to bring into effect a checklist that could help both parties, so we could free up time rather than spend time like this that could be best spent dealing with proper applications and proper enforcement. Thanks very much, Darren.
Just on that, Councillor, we can take that forward, and we are as officers and taking that forward separately. The other side of that I'd throw back is that really if developers built what they got approval, we wouldn't be here in the first place. Sweet.
I agree with you totally, but we don't live in a perfect world. So what we try and do is make it as perfect as we can. So we see an imperfection and we try and rectify it. But I take your point and I agree with your point. Thanks very much, Darren.
Just going to bring Paul McDermott at this point.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and Councillor, thanks for the point. And we discussed that last at the original committee meeting, just in terms of the wastewater treatment works, the pre-commencement conditions. Just in terms of enforcement, look, if we were going to liaise with building control in terms of commencement of the foundations and checking each one of those applications in terms of whether they were constructed in terms of the plans, I think we'd have to look at our resources. We wouldn't be resourced at the minute to do that. That would take a lot of work, both working through with building control, the developments that have commenced, and then going out and site and checking those on the ground to make sure they're in accordance with the plans. But certainly happy to avoid situations like this, taking forward that project, certainly, yeah.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Chair. Given all the information we've got, as a councillor, my understanding is we've been asked by the developer to correct their mistake and allow them to continue, and to the detriment of the residents already there. So my view is we go with the recommendation of the officers and refuse, and that's the proposal.
You making that proposal? Thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair, and an interesting debate altogether, and a really, I suppose it's a sad statement we're in here on this one. I'm prepared to second Councillor McLaughlin's proposal for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McElduff.
Just to say that I support the proposal and second, as has already occurred. And it's a great reminder too that the impact that bad planning, not on the part of planning service in this case or the council planning officials, but a bad application can have a seriously detrimental impact on the quality of people's lives and their mental health. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Deehan.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, Chair, I think this course of action is very clear, and I'm happy to support the recommendation of the officer and Councillor McClaughley's proposal. And I just do feel very moved by Mrs. McCann's address to us here in committee this morning. This has been going on for far too long and really has impacted in a very significant way on her health and well-being. And I think that that is something that is very much to be avoided in the future if we can. Very regrettable. And, you know, it is unfortunate as well for the building contractor that he will now have to remove these homes and build them as to specification. But I think it also should serve as a reminder to developers that they do have a responsibility to adhere strictly to the planning conditions and the original planning application. But happy to support the officer's recommendation, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, members, so we have a proposal by Councillor McClahary, seconded by Councillor Thompson, in support of the officer's recommendation. Are we all in agreement? All agreed, and we had one councillor online. I just can't see if the Councillor Feely is still online, but
Yes, I'm still here, Glenn. Yes, agree. I've been here all along.
yeah. Okay, all in agreement then. Thank you, members.
Okay, members, so the recommendation then was to refuse planning permission for the reasons listed within the report. Members have refused planning permission subject to that one reason.
Okay, thank you, members. We're moving on now to application 6, which is LA 10 2020 11F, sorry, 1114 F. I'll ask Darren to introduce the application.
Okay, members, so the application LA 10 2020 1114. It's a full application for it's a storage shed and retail outlet building for the sale of coal, gas and firewood. The applicant then is CBD and the location then is 81 Enniskillen Road in Ballymallard. The recommendation is to refuse planning permission for the reasons listed within the report and subject to the one reason. Just provide members with an update. Since the publication of the report, additional emails have been received from objectors. So we have an email then from H. McFarland on the 11th of March. Continues to object to the application and includes photos of HGVs and also repeats the issues that they had raised previously in their objections on the file regarding inconvenience, noise, pollution, loss of amenity, loss of privacy, health and safety concerns, and the fact this was previously a residential lane accessed by single cars. There's also an email from Ian R. Hamilton received on the 14th of March, which continues the objection as well. States that Fisher Holdings have not been served with notice as stated in the application forms. Repeats the roads issues raised previously and the need to upgrade the access and displays, and they're not agreeable to providing land to allow this. An email then from N. McFarland on the 14th of March with an accompanying Word document. Again, repeats the issue raised previously, including the Fisher Holdings have not been notified. The rigid lorry is now operating since the start of March. More distribution, more deliveries, traffic intensification, more noise and disturbance. This is now a large-scale quality distribution centre. So the issues raised, members, have been included within the report and have been considered. Just in terms of the notification on the third party, so Fisher Holdings, that's the applicant is required to do that as part of the planning application. It's done outside of the council, so they serve notice on Fisher Holdings themselves. There's no evidence that Fisher Holdings are not aware of that. Planning permission goes with the land anyway, so if permission is granted today, it will be subject to conditions, and those conditions must be carried out in accordance with any decision that's made today. So I don't see any prejudice in going ahead with the application or any requirement to defer to review that issue. No, just in terms of the application, I'll take you through the details, members, on the screen. So you can see the site location plan. The yellow then is the main road through Ballymallard, and the blue arrow then is coming off the main road up the laneway, with the red line starting at the edge of the public road, running up the laneway to the application site, which is adjacent to the yellow star. So again, members, the bottom of the slide, you can see there the yellow line is the main road. You come in along the blue arrow, which is the existing laneway. You go up into the site and you can see the two buildings in Store 1 and Store 2. And there are improvements proposed as part of the retention application at the bottom. You can see those. I'll come on to those in a second. So that's the improvements then. You can see there will be an increase in the width of the accesses there at the moment, out to 6 metres to allow the vehicles to enter and exit the site, and allow a turning radius of 6 metres on the right hand side. Visible displays then will be provided behind the dotted line to allow safe access and entrance. And then the aerial photograph. So you can see then the yellow line is the main road. You come in off the existing laneway, which is the red line, the red arrow. Comes off the public road up in towards the application site, which is identified by the yellow star. So you can see it was formerly a grassed area in front of the existing property beside it, and has now been developed for the business. In terms of the nearby properties, you can see the houses that are adjacent to the site. So you come in off the laneway, you can see if you go up the laneway, there is the application site with the yellow star, and then you have the applicant's property, or a relative of the applicant's property is 81, and then you have the two other properties at the end of the lane, which are the green dots, and other houses in nearby. You can see number 87, which is immediately adjacent to the site, to the southwest direction and the south direction, and then you have other properties in to the northeast, which are identified by the green dots. So if you just go back to my memory, so you can see the yellow line then, come in off the yellow line off the public road, you then go up the laneway into the application site, and you do have the two stores, so Store 1 and Store 2. And that's the view then looking in towards it. The development, as I say, has commenced. The buildings are on the left-hand side then, and on the right-hand side then there is material stored. These were taken at the time of the planning officer's site visit during the construction works. Stored then in the yard adjacent to that shed. That has all been removed now, and at the time of my visit there was nothing being stored there. However, the white box, which is identified with the yellow arrow, so you can see that's it there, and that's the sales office. So just at the top of the lane, looking back down, you can see then the width of the laneway, and you'll note the objector's concerns about the width of the laneway and the impact it has upon the lane. Sorry. So Store 1 and Store 2. So you can see then Building 1 on the right, it has been fully constructed and completed, and the business is now operational. That's the elevations of it. So you can see the end elevation facing onto the laneway, and then the side elevation with two openings at either end. And it's described as retail sales outlet for pre-bagged coal, gas and logs for firewood. Building 2 then is the larger of the two buildings. It's an open fronted building, and you can see then the elevations and the side elevation then on the top left, with the floor plan then in the bottom right. So you can see it's enclosed on three sides with the front open, and it's annotated as being a storage shed for pre-bagged coal and logs for firewood. And that's a photograph then of Building 2. As part of the application, there is a one-way system proposed, so you can see vehicles will come in and go around Store 1, and that's the direction of travel. A fence has been erected along the side of Store 1, which prohibits that one-way movement of traffic. However, the application could be conditioned that this is put in place and as part of any approval. So the fact there is a fence there at the moment is not really that relevant or material to the application before you today. The applicant is proposing a one-way system, and that could be conditioned. In terms then of the amenity of neighbours, you'll note from the report, members, that the reason for refusal does relate to the impact upon the neighbours, really from the operation of the business and the operation of the traffic. So the vehicles will come in off the laneway in around Store 1, and you can see then the proximity to number 87, which is the yellow star. The applicant is proposing a fence, and that has been constructed. So the fence along the side boundary, a 2-metre high double-sided screen fence, and is sought to demonstrate that that fence will mitigate the impact upon the neighbours. And a noise report has been submitted by them, by the applicants, which seeks to demonstrate that the impact on the neighbouring property will not be unacceptable. and I'm sure the agent will want to refer to that. So I've put these on the screen, and he can maybe explain those to you and talk through in more detail just what the levels mean and the colours on them. But the outcome of their report is that they consider the noise nuisance and the impact is noticeable but not intrusive, is the way it's described. So the reason for refusal then, members, is contrary to the SPPS and the policies listed there, as the development is not of a scale and nature appropriate to the character of the settlement, as a development would unacceptably affect the amenities of neighbours by reason of noise and general disturbance. Essentially, members, the question before you today is included in paragraph 2.3 of the SPPS. You can see there, I just highlighted a bit in blue, members, and I'll just read that out to you. So the basic question is not whether owners or occupiers of neighbouring properties would experience financial or other loss from a particular development, but whether the proposal would unacceptably affect amenities and the existing use of land and buildings that ought to be protected in the public interest. Good neighbourliness and fairness are among the yardsticks against which development proposals will be measured. Okay, members?
Okay, thank you. So in respect of this application, we have speaking rights to a number of people. So first of all, we have an opportunity for Mr. Paul Bradley to speak as the agent for the application. So we have 10 minutes allocated. Mr. Bradley, you're very welcome to go ahead in your own time.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
We can indeed, yes.
Yes, I'd like to first thank the committee for calling this in to be considered properly. The refusal recommendation for this application can be broken down as two main points as listed in the report uploaded to the planning portal. The first is that the development is not of a scale and nature appropriate to the character of the settlement. However, I would refer you to the committee to page 7 of the report, and the last line of the subtitled design clearly states that the scale and design are appropriate to the character of the settlement. On page 8, the report sets out how the application is located in an area which is largely residential. It does not state that this is wholly residential. In the immediate vicinity of the site, there is an existing adjacent building which has a history of commercial use for over 30 years. While it is stated that this is not in use, the use was approved for car sales and vehicle storage, which was inactive, and this realistically could start to trade in the same site again under the previous use class. There are a number of farm buildings off the same laneway, which are also non-residential. And widening out from the applicant site, but still only about 100 metres away, there is a very large sports complex that is Ballinamallard United Football Club. And on match days, this generates a significant traffic along this stretch of road. When travelling along the site frontage of the Enniskillen Road, there is residential development. However, it can easily be described as a mixed-use area. On this basis, it would appear that the scale and design are acceptable by planning, and they are located on a mixed-use area. The second issue is the effect on amenities of neighbouring properties by reason of noise and general disturbance. The submitted noise report clearly sets out that there is enough existing ambient noise from the surroundings, especially the existing main road, that any predicted noise will be masked by the existing noise. The predicted noise at the amenity spaces at adjoining properties will be noticeable but not intrusive, as stated in the report. However, it will still not be any worse than the existing background noise levels created locally. The main receptor that the Environmental Health Department have mentioned is number 87, which is just southwest of the site. However, they have not objected to this application and have offered the applicant support in his business on numerous occasions. The resident of number 87 is a regular customer and has advised our applicant that she has no issues with this business. The planning report confirms that other objectors are not affected by noise as they are further away and screened by buildings. See the bottom of page 9. On the noise images that Darren showed up, if you look at them closely, the red is where the most noise would be, and as the colours change and spreads out, the noise reduces and reduces. So it's only immediately in around the sheds. Environmental Health Department have stated they have concerns with regards to the noise, but they have not recommended refusal based on the noise report, and the closest neighbour, number 87, does not object and has no concerns. At no time has Environmental Health had to visit this site with regards to complaints in over 3 years of trading at this site. With regards to the objections, the planning report sets out the concerns that objectors have raised, and the report states that the planning system does not exist to protect the private interests of one person against the activities of the other. While objectors are entitled to their views, good neighbours and fairness should be considered. Some of the objections raised are exaggerated or not factually correct. Some objectors either don't live locally or don't even appear to exist. Images of deliveries in the objections are over a 1 year period rather than 1 week, and the images submitted by the objectors have tried to paint a picture of a logjam on a regular basis. This is not factually correct. No logs are cut and split at the site, and despite what objections say, they are delivered pre-cut, and in fact, one of the objector's images clearly shows that an image of pre-cut logs being delivered to the site. These same images confirm the majority of vehicles are rigid vehicles and not articulated lorries, as stated in our transport form. The applicant would welcome any site inspection at any time to show how well run and maintained the business is. And the opening hours are 9 to 6 Monday to Friday and 9 to 3 on Saturday, which are pretty standard hours, and these can be conditioned if necessary. The applicant's concerns, however, should also be considered. The only time the lane has been fully blocked is when someone not associated with the business abandoned their car on the lane, and there's also a PSNI history of dangerous driving on the lane by someone not associated with the business. At all times, the applicant tries to ensure passage when the lane is available and keeps a tidy site to ensure good neighbourliness. This is clarified in the planning report. There has been a small increase in the number of deliveries to the site due to the pandemic and issues around Brexit and supply. Suppliers are delivering smaller loads as and when they receive them. Normally, there would be less deliveries and one larger bulk delivery, and this should reduce after Brexit issues are, if ever, ironed out. The applicant also asked suppliers to only deliver to the site in rigid vehicles. Once the one-way system and road improvements are implemented on the site, a lot of the concerns from the objectors would be removed should this application be permitted. Access to the laneway has been agreed by the adjoining landowner Fisher Holdings that has been referred to, and our applicant holds a legal agreement in place with Fisher Holdings for use of this lane. The same landowner controls the land for the proposed road improvements. Despite what the planning report also states on DFI roads issues, these have been fully addressed, and site displays as requested have been indicated in both directions on the current site layout. And the layout also provides 7 parking spaces and not 5 as stated. Furthermore, there's a slight difference being made in assessing this site. On an adjacent application immediately across the road, LA10 2020-1077, DFI roads have only requested 2.4 by 70 metre sightlines, yet our site has been asked for 2.4 by 81. They're directly opposite each other, and the road speeds do not change from one side of the road to the other. So this should be also applied to our site. In summary, this site is located in a historically mixed-use area, and while the site does generate some noise, it is clearly masked by existing noise in the area, and the applicant tries to respect neighbours at all times. The immediately closest neighbour supports this business in number 87 and has no objections, and other objectors are around 100 metres away from the site. All roads and noise concerns have been addressed as part of the application, and if the applicant is given the chance to implement the suggested improvements, this would vastly improve all parties' concerns and protect the 5 employees at this small, locally owned business. A business that in November 2021 was awarded a business development grant from Fermanagh Nova District Council to help develop and sustain the business. We respectfully request that the committee carefully consider the facts and not the fiction of this application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bradley. Well, within the time, we have an opportunity if any members want to ask any questions of the agent. Councillor Garrity.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thanks, Mr. Bradley, there for his presentation. There's quite a lot to take in there, so just want a bit of clarity, maybe make sure I've picked 1 or 2 things up right. He mentioned the objectors, and if Mr. Bradley could confirm, He said that a lot of them are from not around the area. I would wonder why, but if he could clarify that. And secondly, I noticed in the report there is concern with the noise and general disturbance. Did he say that environmental health had been out on complaints or hadn't? Sorry, I just couldn't catch that right. Just those 2 points. Thanks, Chair.
He said he hadn't, but I'll ask the agent to comment. Go ahead, Mr. Bradley.
Yes, on the second point, environmental health have never been asked to come out to the site over any complaints about noise. There has been no reports of it. On the objectors, you only have to look at some of the addresses of the objectors, and they clearly don't live locally. There's also one objector that's wrote. It nearly comes across as if it's from number 87, and it's clearly not. It's named under a Mr. Martin, and local knowledge suggests nobody knows who this person is or where they come from. So it appears to be in there to muddy the water from to make it look like it's number 87, but the occupier of number 87 is a customer and fully supports this application.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions at this point for the agent? And nobody is indicating, so in that case, Councillor Rainey, no problem. Go ahead there.
Thank you for the presentation. Did I pick it up right that vehicles coming on the site with supplies would be of a stiff a body nature, not articulated vehicles? And if that was factual, how would that be regulated?
Go ahead, Councillor.
Yeah, basically, I mean, even some of the images that have been submitted clearly shows it's all rigid vehicles, and our applicant does request that only rigids to come to deliver this site. Now, look, don't get me wrong, it can be conditioned that way, but there may be an occasion where somebody does arrive in an articulated lorry. I've had 2 doors delivered to my house and come in an articulated lorry. It's very hard to tell somebody you cannot come here in that lorry, but majority, 99% of vehicles that come to this site are only rigid vehicles, and they can be stopped at the public roadway if it comes to it, and it can be conditioned that way.
Okay, and if an articulated a vehicle did arrive on site and arrive at in the yard, is there a provision to have be able to get that vehicle turned to drive off again, or would it have to reverse right back to the road?
No, Councillor Rainey, there has been, as I say, 1 or 2 occasions where a HGV or articulated lorry has arrived on site. They weren't invited, obviously, but they have been able to turn within the yard space adjacent to the site and leave again without having to reverse onto the public road. And that's without the road improvements.
Okay, yeah, I've answered that question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Okay, thank you. Councillor Thompson, you're okay. I'm reading body language here. I thought Councillor Thompson wanted in there. Thank you, Mr. Bradley, for your taking time to address the committee. We're going to move on at this point, and we're going to have representation by Mr. Andrew McFarland, who is speaking on behalf of objectors to the application. You're very welcome, Mr. McFarland. We have 5 minutes allocated to this part of the meeting, and I will sort of let you know when we approach the 5-minute mark, just to bring your comments to a close. So you can go ahead in your own time.
Thank you, Chairman, councillors. There are many reasons why this planning application should be refused. Time only permits me to deal with the main 6. The application fails to demonstrate that the business is necessary at this location, thus contravening strategic planning policy statement paragraph 6.278. There are numerous businesses within a 3-mile radius of this site already selling similar products. 2, it is sited in a residential area within the village limits, in an area previously deemed to have high residential amenity. The quality and character of the area have been destroyed by noise, nuisance, dust, vermin, etc. 3, the planning application is misleading The newly concreted area containing the two sheds covers 700 square metres, but in reality the business also uses the red corrugated shed, the lane and the hard standing opposite, totaling 2,200 square metres. The application states retail and storage of coal, gas and firewood. It fails to disclose the vast array of products listed by CB Fuels on Amazon, eBay, Facebook, Dundee, etc. Products such as hypochlorite, farm animal feeds and bedding, paint, peat, compost and topsoil, various fence materials, etc. Coal, cement, peat briquettes and postcrete are all sold by the ton. All these highlight the vast amount of products that need to be delivered to site before distribution. Instead of a retention of a small coal, gas and firewood business, this is actually a change of use from a lawned front garden and a quiet residential lane and area of hard standing into a large quantity distribution centre. This may be modest in scale in a commercial setting, but certainly not in a residential setting. The local government plan highlights such businesses should be located in land zoned for business and industry or existing industrial area. Notice of application for planning permission to widen the lane. The agent signed Certificate C on the 18th of March 21, stating that the requisite notice form P2A had been served on Fisher Holdings 8 days earlier on the 10th of March. We have spoken to Fisher Holdings and they categorically deny receipt of form P2A, hence no response has appeared on the planning portal as protocol dictates. The transport assessment form is also misleading. There is huge traffic intensification that the form grossly underestimates, stating that, and I quote, a small rigid vehicle will be the largest visiting the site. Photographic evidence previously submitted to the planning department clearly shows articulated lorries and rigid lorries regularly on site. Add to this customer cars and trailers, tractors and trailers, courier vans, pickup trucks, etc. The forklift truck is constantly in operation with loading and unloading concentrated mainly in the area of hard standing opposite and on the lane. The designated customer parking areas, these cannot be used for customer parking as they're used as storage bays. Due to the site being so congested, there is no other space available to relocate these products. The proposed one-way system incorporates we, the residents, only access to enter and exit our homes. How can a one-way system and a two-way system coexist on the same section of lane? The proposed one-way system, as already mentioned, is now blocked by the recent erection of a garden fence. Sightlines. The DFI consultation response states that the sightlines are substandard on both, I emphasise both, fence lines need to be set back. The applicant neither owns nor controls the land on either side of the entrance to the lane. Safety amendments to the agent's drawing recommended by DFI Roads have been ignored and not actioned. 5. This business has an overbearing impact on a residential amenity in terms of physical scale, oppression and intrusion. We feel oppressed using the lane. We feel it's unsafe to walk, cycle or drive on. It is uncomfortable even putting the bin out. There have been several near misses involving both pedestrians and vehicles. Whilst driving on the lane, safety is a huge concern, so much so that a number of our cars have had dash cams fitted. We feel stressed and anxious using the lane, and in addition, we feel our right to a peaceful and private life has been eroded. Finally, 6. Nuisance is highlighted in the case officer's report. It's defined as, and I quote, what ordinary, decent people find unacceptable and unreasonable. We consider this application totally unacceptable and totally unreasonable. In summary, the application should be refused due to all these factors. They are causing significant detriment to the quality of life, mental health and well-being of all of us. In contradiction to the first principle of SPPS, which is improving health and well-being. Good neighbourliness and fairness are notable by their absence. The applicant has set up this business in a residential area with total disregard to the impact on all of us. We have not had any contact from or discussion with the applicant prior to, during or since the development started.
Sorry, Mr. McFarlane, we've approached, we just ended the 5 minutes. Just bring your comments to a close. Thank you.
I have one more sentence if you want, Chairman.
Yeah, go ahead, Chair.
Finally, we hope the misleading information supplied in the application will not lead to an erroneous decision. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McFarland. And I would invite our members if they have any questions for the objector in this. Councillor Irvine.
Thanks very much, Mr. McFarland, but I'll call you Andy. Thanks very much indeed for detailing your objections to this application. In fact, in your submission, you have quite eloquently outlined each of the areas for objection and given information and rebutted basically what the agent, Mr. Bradley, has come forward. There's obviously a direct conflict with regard to certain information that Mr. Bradley, the agent, has provided in regard to the applicant. And indeed, you have a different version of events, and so does our planning officer. So there appears to be two sides to the coin. I know which side that I'm going to be falling on. So thank you very much indeed for your submission.
Thank you, Councillor.
Councillor Garrity.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks again to Mr. McFarland. Just one question for clarity again, taking it all in. Did Mr. McFarland say that there are already a number of businesses close by operating the same sort of business, selling the same sort of material? Did he say there was that?
So, thank you for your question. Yes, I can list 5 within a 3-mile radius, all selling similar products.
Okay, that's grand. Just picked you up right. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions for the objector? Okay. So nobody is indicating. So at this point, I thank Mr. McFarland for speaking to the committee. And we're going to now move on, and we have 5 minutes allocated for contribution by councillors. We have Councillor Diana Armstrong in support of the objectors, and we also have Councillor Siobhan Curry in support of the applicant. And I suppose we probably best to allocate 2.5 minutes per contribution in this case. So I'd maybe invite, going alphabetically here, just on surname, I'd invite Councillor Diana Armstrong to speak first, if that's okay.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, members, for allowing me to speak on this matter. We've heard both presentations there. I'm speaking in support of the officer's recommendations to refuse planning permission, and it's on the grounds of loss of amenity to neighbouring residents, on environmental concerns regarding dirty water runoff and the impact of noise from vehicles on this site, as well as the access laneway. Under SPPS Para 2.3, the concepts of unacceptable effect on amenities and of good neighbourliness and fairness are used in considering development proposals, and we've heard that, but with the planning officer having said that. In this proposal, we have clearly heard from Mr. McFarland about the impact of the operation of this depot on the adjacent residential properties. And my opinion is that it is a depot rather than a retail outlet. And a depot, as defined, is a place for the storage of large quantities of food or goods. And we've seen in the photographs an indication, and we've also heard the extent of the products on sale. Turning to good neighbourliness, goodwill was neither sought nor received in this application. The neighbours felt they were not consulted with the expansion of this business. So this proposal is unacceptable in terms of the loss of amenity to the residents. It does unacceptably affect amenities. It is a constant stream of wholesale and retail customers visiting the property. Its operating hours, 9 to 6 days a week, with deliveries often outside of these hours. This means the narrow laneway is in constant use. The officer's report states that the estimates of traffic and customer numbers are significantly underestimated. And in addition, as pointed out by Mr. McFarland, in addition to coal, firewood and gas, the business advertises on social media many other products. Such a wide range of products undoubtedly draws more than 10 cars per day, whether deliveries or collections. It's claimed that 90% of the business is deliveries, but if this is accurate, then this 90% means constant loading of goods by forklift onto vans and flatbed lorries. EHD has concerns about adverse noise impact from the movement of vehicles and reversing alarms of forklifts on the neighbouring residents.
Ask you, Councillor, to bring your comments to a close. Thank you.
Thank you. This constant movement of goods up and down the narrow lane is adversely affecting the amenity of the neighbours. So really, I would ask the planning members to consider these points and support the officer's recommendation to refuse planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Armstrong. I'd now invite Councillor Curry if you want to speak in support of the application.
And thank you and the members for allowing me to speak on behalf of the applicant here today. I think the officers have outlined it very well in the report, and Mr. Bradley, the agent, also. Just looking at the single reason for refusal, item 7 on page 6 does elaborate on this more, and it really comes down to one thing: the proposal complies with SPPS at paragraph 6.278 on items 1 and 2, and the main discussion is around item 3, scale, nature and design appropriate to the character of the settlement. And if you break that down further, the scale and design, the officials, the plan officials are happy with that. It's all coming down to what you're considering is the nature of the application, and we've heard about how other businesses have been operating in the vicinity. Just dealing with the refusal as per the recommendations with regard to paragraph 2.3 of the SPPS, storage of the materials won't affect or harm the neighbour's amenity. That's there in the report. Potential harm actually just comes down to potential nuisance from noise. And we've heard that a TAF and noise impact assessment has been provided, and the predicted noise levels are low and likely to be masked by ambient noise levels. And there's nothing in this report that indicates otherwise. There might be concerns by environmental health, but we've heard and we can see there is nothing concrete, and there has been no assessment from that point of view. Despite this, and presumably from a good neighbour point of view, however, an acoustic fence is being proposed along the common boundary with number 87. Just regarding PPS 4, PPD 1 and 9, again, these hinge on the proposal being fit into the character of the village, and as outlined, this application appears to comply with policy. The only question arising despite the noise report having been completed, which finds no nuisance, is around noise and disturbance. On additional matters, it is a material consideration that the application may add valued employment opportunities. The business is currently supporting 5 jobs, that's 5 incomes into our local area. So, Chair,
Councillor, just ask you bring your comments to a close.
Yeah, I think it's just a very important point to make, and I'd again respectfully suggest that all policy tests have been met, including around noise and nuisance, which appears to be the only bone of contention, and therefore ask members just to approve this application to support these jobs and potential future jobs for this applicant, which the applicant is demonstrating clearly there's a community need here that's being served.
Thank you, Councillor, and thanks to Councillor Armstrong. At this point, I'll ask our planning officers if there's any comments they'd like to make.
No members happy to take questions?
Any questions for our officers? Councillor Irvine?
Thanks very much, Chair. It's not really a question for Darren. I've listened to the arguments on both sides, including from the objectors and from the 2 councillors. I've read the file. I'm happy that the officer's position is the position that should be taken by the committee, and therefore I'm going to propose that this application is refused. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor, and Councillor Garrity.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I tend to take a different view to Councillor Irvine and indeed the officers. The reason being the noise seems to be the main contention in our report, which is one we have to go by. And I do believe that the noise report submitted does alleviate the problem that we have there. I am surprised that if there was a concern with noise, that there'd be no complaints to environmental health and then subsequently visits out. I believe this is a thriving business, and I do believe there are other thriving businesses in the locality. And that also means thriving competition within the locality. And sometimes competition is wanted and sometimes it's not. And that's understandable. That's the nature of business in itself. I do realise that there's employment here. I do accept that it is a mixed use area. I am there regularly at the Ballymallard Football Club, which I have children who play for them. It is residential, but it is mixed use, and there is big companies and businesses close to it. I think we as a council have identified last year, according to the agent, Mr. Bradley, some support that has been given to grow this business. Now, we all know how difficult our regime is to support and get things like that through the council. It wouldn't have been granted unless it was on merit of the business. So there's clearly a need for that business there. It's clearly providing a service. I am concerned if there's noise, but with the noise report, I'm content that it's not a problem and that this application should be approved. The scale and nature is not out of character within the settlement. As I say, it's a mixed use area. I know the road well, and you can't identify the area at all. On match days, it is a busy road, and as I say, you have all sorts of activity going on. And I think this committee should view this as an opportunity for a business to give competition in an area and will benefit maybe the wider community and those jobs given back into our community. And I think I propose, Chair, that we approve this application today. Thank you.
No problem. Just bring Councillor.
Yeah, just yes, members, just in your comments made, members, just to point out that although there is a comment being made by the agent that there's no environmental health objections or no complaints to environmental health, I'm not aware of that as a planning officer. But what I am aware is that environmental health have been consulted and have given us their comments. And I think it's what the member is saying should be in relation to the environmental health comments. And they're saying really that it's up to the planning officers and the planning committee. So I wouldn't give any weight, member, in your proposal to the fact or the comment that there's been no complaints to environmental health, because we don't know that.
Okay, accept that, Darren. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Maguire.
I'm going to market, Glenn. Thanks, Glenn. I'd like to second Councillor Garrity's proposal. I'm familiar with Ballymallard going back over 60 years. I remember visiting it as a young boy and driving up a lane, and in fact, it may be the same lane, and there was extensive pig farming at the top of the lane, and you went past residential houses on the way. So the nature of Ballymallard, in my recollection, go back that far, was that you would have had that mix of farming and sort of working environment and the mixture of domestic houses. So I'm quite content that given that this place has been in existence for 3 years and I don't believe we've had any major complaints to environmental health. I don't believe we have had complaints to environmental health, but that option is obviously open to the residents there if it would continue. But on balance, given the employment and the fact that it seems to me that they're doing all they can to facilitate the easy entrance and exit from the site, I'm quite happy to second Councillor Gary's proposal.
Okay, members. Councillor Rainey.
Well, Chair, listening to the debate for and against, I'm happy to propose our second Councillor Irvine's proposal.
Okay, members. We do have 2 proposals that have been seconded. The first proposal to be seconded was that of Councillor Garrity. That was proposed by Councillor Garrity, seconded by Councillor Maguire, and that was a proposal in support of the application against the officer's recommendation to refuse. Are members all in agreement? Not in agreement. In that case, we're going to have a show of hands in support of Councillor Garrity's proposal. And I would ask the Councillor online, Councillor Feely, to maybe indicate as well. So those hands raised in support are Councillor Deehan, Councillor Garrity, Councillor McElduff, Councillor Maguire, and Councillor Campbell. And I'm just checking online. Councillor Feely is still connected.
Yes, I have my hand up there, Glenn, in case you can't see it.
Yeah, okay, I see that now, yeah. Okay, and those against the proposal? Councillor Irvine, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Rainey, and Councillor Robinson. So that proposal has been carried, and I would ask Darren to sum up.
So members, the recommendation then was to refuse planning permission for the reasons listed within the report and subject to one reason. Members have gone contrary to the recommendation and have granted full planning approval for the application. In respective conditions, members, can I just run through maybe some suggested conditions and ask that the final wording of the conditions is delegated back to officers to agree. So the application is described as a storage shed and retail outlet building for the sale of coal, gas and firewood. So we'd suggest a condition goes on that it is coal, gas and firewood only in accordance with the description. The provision of the access improvements, displays, etc., all to be provided within a certain time period. So we can discuss that with the applicant, but a reasonable time period of 2 months or something similar would be appropriate. The provision of the parking and to keep that free. No deliveries be HGVs, so it'll be small rigid box lorries only, or not box lorries, but small rigid lorries only. Retention of the fence beside the neighbour and keep that in good condition. Provide the one-way system, and then the hours of operation that were suggested by the applicant within the report and in the speaking rights today. So those would be the suggested conditions.
First, we're moving on now. Members, we're moving on now to application number 7. That's LA 10 2021 11440. And it may be proposed we take this application and then a short recess for in terms of planning ahead. Okay, members?
Okay, members, so application 7 is LA 10 2021 /1144. It's an outline application for a new dwelling by M. Rankin and L. Young on the Drumron Road in Drumquin. Recommendation then is to refuse planning permission for the reasons listed within the report and subject to the one reason. We'll just take members through the details on the screen then. You can see the site location plan, and the site then is identified as a rectangular shaped plot adjacent to the road, and it's identified by the yellow star. And you can see the Drummond Road and then the Craigmore Road to the right hand side, and several other properties that are nearby. Additional plans then, it is an outline application, but there are quite a few plans and drawings accompanying the application, so I'll put those on the screen as well, members, to ensure you're fully informed. So on the left then is a block plan showing the outline and the position of the site in relation to the relationship to the other houses, and you can see the green sort of hatching on the plan. The right hand plan then is a block plan showing the position of the house as proposed, and the entrance then coming in off the Drumron Road. These plans then, members say, although it is outlined, they have been submitted, so they are material, and any decision is made will be based upon these plans. So you can see the site section and elevations, and this shows the front elevation of the property in the east, southeast, and then the site section. And the ground floor plan then, members, showing the entrance coming in and the parking area and the ground floor. And then the first floor plan, which shows the upper floors of the building. Then you have the elevations, as I say, members. So These are included as part of the application, and any decision made today will be based upon these plans. There's a delay, member. Sorry, in updating the screen. Sorry. Yeah, so that's the other elevation and members of the building as proposed. So moving on then to the aerial photographs. So you're looking down on top of the site, and you can see the other buildings in the area. The public road runs along the east-west, and then obviously there's a junction then with the road running, another road running north. Our application site is identified in the area of the blue arrow, which you can see on the screen. And then just a closer view looking in on top of the application site. So you can see it's just the junction where the blue arrow is, and then you have the other properties nearby. So some critical views in, members, just looking at the application site. So you're standing at the yellow star and you're looking towards the application site. That's the view there you can get. These are street view images, obviously, members, so they're taken from a raised height. They are a good indication of the site. So from the other end of the road, looking back towards the site, you can see the junction then, and the site then is on the left-hand side. From the other view then, the yellow star looking down the road, that's you looking down the roads on the left-hand side with the site then further down the road on the right. You can see the adjacent property then, which is the bungalow to the right-hand side. So obviously, members, you'll be aware the policy that's been applied for is under CTY 2A as a new dwelling in an existing cluster. Under that 2A, the policy says permission will be granted for a dwelling at an existing cluster of development provided all the criteria are met. And this is an important point, members, in that it does specifically say all the criteria are met. There is no accompanying justification or amplification with the policy. So what's included in the text box is the policy. So the recommendation in, members, is to refuse permission for the reasons listed within the report, subject to the one reason. Just go through those. So that there's no cluster of development which appears as a visual entity in the local landscape. It's not associated with a focal point, such as a social community building facility, or is located at a crossroads. And you can see, members, just have highlighted there, you do have a T-junction. So you have the existing road and then meeting another road. But that would not be considered a crossroads. And there have been other applications before you where that has been sort of agreed, and we have refused applications on the basis they were not at crossroads, but they were T-junctions. So just encourage and emphasize the issue of consistency of approach here. The site is not bounded on two sides with other development. You can see the application site's a black rectangle. It is bound on the yellow line with the adjacent bungalow. However, it needs to be bound on two sides. There's nothing on the left-hand side, and then you have the road on the right-hand side. And finally, then, development of the site cannot be absorbed into the existing cluster through rounding off and consolidation, as there is no cluster and there's no real rounding off or consolidation opportunities. So the recommendation, members, is to refuse for the reasons listed within the report and subject to the one reason.
Okay, thank you, Darren. At this point, I would invite representation by the planning agent, Mr. Peter Turley. And just to advise, Mr. Turley, you have 10 minutes. And there also is, on behalf of the applicant, Mr. A.I. Rankin as well present. So 10 minutes between the both of you, so however you want to divide it. So you're both very welcome. And in your own time, just go ahead.
Thank you for that. Can you hear me, Chairman?
Can hear you fine, yep, indeed.
Fantastic. Peter, I think I'm going to speak first and then hand over to you.
That's fine, that's fine.
Grand. Folks, for some reason it won't let me turn the camera on, so apologies for that, but as long as you can hear me, I guess that's the important thing. So I'm Alexander Rankin. I'll speak on behalf of the applicant sisters Mary and Lizzie. Mary's my mum, Lizzie's my auntie. To give you an overview of the application, it concerns Mary and Lizzie's desire to build a house on the land they grew up on. The applicant's family have a long association with this land and the land around it. Their parents, the McFaddens, acquired the land in question over 70 years ago, but the family have lived in and on that land for a great deal more time, at least as long as the 19th century, where it's known that their great-great-aunt, Healy, donated a significant portion of her land to the local church. Mary and Lizzie, like many people from Northern Ireland of their generation, left their home in Tyrone in pursuit of opportunities for work, and yet they never really left their home, returning regularly and frequently each year as they did. The applicants wished to return to their home in Northern Ireland, and specifically to the land and the place that has been their home and the home of their ancestors for generations. So touching on that family connection, if I can, if you look back into the records, you'll see that there have always been dwellings on and around the land in question. As far back as the time of the famine, there were several dwellings there, a good deal more than there are today. By the 20th century, those had disappeared, only for new dwellings to be built. Looking at the 21st century again, we see that the number and the nature of the buildings has once again evolved. In essence, there was a long-established ebb and flow to property in this part of the countryside. In line with this ebb and flow, the family has maintained their association and ownership of the land. It's changed more or less in line with the nature and number of dwellings I've just outlined, and it expanded with Healy, contracted after her, expanded again with the McFaddens, and contracted to what we see today after the passing of the applicant's parents. Nonetheless, this ownership and association has been a constant, and this isn't simply about ownership, but actually about a long-standing stewardship and cultural connection to the land and the area. In many ways today, you have a chance to possibly end that long connection or allow it to continue to flourish. The community. This long association isn't just a relationship between the family and the land, but a relationship between the family and the community. Healy, McFadden, Rankin, Young, the names have changed over time, but the family presence is a constant, and that presence has played its part in maintaining the cohesiveness of what is a rich, very diverse, and yet very close-knit community in that part of West Tyrone. This is also why you'll notice that there have been no objections to this application from anyone who actually lives and works in the area. This aspect is entirely supported in policy, where PPS 21 paragraph 1.2 emphasises the need to sustain strong and vibrant rural communities. Economic case. Clearly, by approving this application, there'll be an immediate benefit to local industry. In addition to that fact, Mary and Lizzie have a large direct family, and these people will be regular visitors, significantly benefiting the local economy in the long term. This is also supported by the very first paragraph of PPS 21, where it speaks of developing the rural economy. Design. The house itself will be designed to be fully accessible. The environmental consultant has stated it will be of net ecological benefit. It will be well integrated and in keeping with the rural character of the area. It's a fine example of the PPS 21 intention to build on tradition, which should come as no surprise, as the applicants and their ancestors have played their part in establishing what those traditions are. The planners themselves have stated that it meets with CTY 13 and it meets with CTY 14, which I think is a critical point. In closing, then, it's clear that the planners have some reservations regarding policy CTY 2A, and Peter Turley, the agent, will address those reservations shortly. Before he does, though, I'd like to draw your attention to the second paragraph of the overriding and primary policy known as CTY 1. This paragraph sets out clearly that exceptions can be made. In the context of some reservations regarding CTY 2A, I'm asking you to consider important overriding connections that relate to the local history, culture, the traditions, stewardship, and community in that area. None of these connections can be sustained by directing the applicants to go and live in an established settlement. The applicants simply wish to return to their home. It's my strong view that within the second paragraph of CTY 1, you have the policy coverage to allow them to do so. So, councillors, when it's time for you to make your decision, I respectfully ask that you be pragmatic, that you be compassionate, and that you be courageous. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak today. I'll hand over to Peter now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The number of issues raised in the objection or recommendations for objection. The first point really hinges on the cluster being a visual entity in the landscape. There are 3 dwellings in close proximity, although one is under construction and was approved in 2008, and it seems for some reason has stopped. But the actual proximity of that dwelling that was under construction had close proximity to number 37 Craigmore Road, which sort of looks as though it set a precedent to form a cluster and a group of houses there. So it's looking at the photographs that were issued earlier, looking at the views, the trees are deciduous, and you will probably view the dwellings during the winter months, but that's it's a case that you may consider. The cluster is not associated with the focal point. There is a community building which is opposite number 58 Drumron Road. I'd like you to consider that if you need to. The site is not bounded on 2 sides of the development. There is a green space between number 50 and the site. The proposal, if approved, would provide a horseshoe type arrangement to the development, and this is just a green space of 50 meters thereabouts. The development cannot be absorbed into the existing clusters through rounding off. Again, winter months, you will be able to see this particular proposal, which is to emulate a bar, which is a corrugated tin, both walls and roof, and will look like an agricultural building in this setting. And given that it does integrate and its design into the development, it'd be grateful if you could view that on that basis. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Turley and Mr. Rankin, for keeping within the time. At this point, I'd invite members of the committee if they have any questions for the agent or the applicant. We have nobody indicating at this point. So I'm going to move on. I thank you both for taking time to speak to the committee. I'm going to move on to Councillor Mark Buchanan, who is speaking in support of the applicant. You're very welcome, Councillor Buchanan. As you know, you have 5 minutes to make your contribution. So in your own time, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, members, for the opportunity to speak in support of the application and for the officer for setting out the reasons for refusal. Well, I wish to speak in support of the application today, members, before you. As you know, I represent West Tyrone and I'm familiar with the Drumcone area and specifically this site and where it lies within the local area. Some of the reasons for refusal are around that it doesn't cluster specifically, and another reason was not associated with a focal point or a community facility. Well, just on the clustering application, I suppose, in my opinion, I believe it would cluster and integrate. If you're coming out of Drumcone towards this site, you drive along that slip road towards the T-junction, and you can visually make out the 2 or 3 dwellings that are around this. And I suppose, in my opinion, if this dwelling it has been designed in such a way to integrate, and I believe it would cluster with the dwellings around it. If you're driving along that road approaching the T-junction, you can make out the other houses. The house that is proposed on the application, it would blend in well with the surrounding properties. And just on the other issue, there is another issue of the being associated with a community hall or facility. Well, for those that will know that area, this dwelling would be within walking distance from Drumroan Hall, just on up that road on the right hand side. So it definitely could be linked in with that with regard to community hall or community facility. And of course, that hall holds regular community functions and is a focal community point in the locality. Just on another point for members, I suppose it wouldn't be visually linked or anything, but this site would also be very close to the town of Drumquin. And there is that new Drumquin Community Youth Centre, which has just been restored a few years ago, which is also very close to this site as well. I suppose, members, the applicant, Mr. Rankin there, has set out the personal notice votes of the applicants, 2 retired sisters who wish to move back to Drumquin. The plot of land that has been farmed by their parents for 70 years. There's a lot of family history in the area and family connections. So I would ask members to consider the application favourably. While the officer has said it may not meet, and we have to be honest, it may not meet the full policy criteria, but I do believe that, as set out by Mr. Rankin, that the overriding points are met and that there is the desire and the need for these sisters to move back to their homeland. And I would ask members to look favourably on the application and what is before us today. Thanks for your time, members and chairman.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Buchanan. And within the time, at this point, I'm going to ask our planning officers if they have any comment to make.
Yeah, members, just to be clear on the policies before you, just that it's an application under CDY 2A, and as I say, the policy says permission will be granted for dwelling at an existing cluster, provided all the following criteria are met. The concern of officers and the thing that would worry me is that we maintain a consistent approach as a council. We have had applicants who have made applications and regrettably have been refused planning permission because they don't meet all the criteria of CDY 2A. They've gone to planning appeal and they've been unsuccessful at planning appeal. Other applicants have made applications and been refused as well. They haven't gone to appeal. So there are previous applications before us and before this committee which have been refused because they don't meet all the criteria. And as I say, it's the issue of consistency, how we as a council maintain that in the event of somebody coming back and say, oh, but hang on, I got refused. So those are the issues that would be important today when members are considering and debating and reaching a decision on this application.
Okay, Councillor McLahry.
Thank you, Chair. Darren, there's one of the, have you like an aerial view that we're looking down on the whole, on the bigger area, just do we get a, yeah, I think that's the one I wanted to see. Thank you. If you could leave that for a minute or two to have a look at it to see what I'm thinking here. Thank you.
Councillor. Councillor McLahry.
So obviously the blue pointer is to where the proposed site is, and the next one is that an actual dwelling as we go up the screen?
Yeah, to the north of the blue pointer.
Yeah, thank you.
Maybe just go to the next plan there, so you can see the site then is identified. You can see it on the screen there at the junction. So there is number 87 to the north, which is that house. And then you have the footprint of the house under construction. And then you have another house over to the left-hand side. And the other buildings then to the right-hand side of the road. You can see those by the grey boxes, number 40, and there's 54 as well. Just go back so you can see that's number 50 is the big property. And number 40. As members now, an aerial view does give a great presentation of the buildings in the area and in the landscape, but the planning policy really we're not in an airplane. You know, you're on the road, so when you're driving along the road, you can see the trees and the hedges and everything that's all around there. They are deciduous, yes, but when you're driving along that road, it really does retain the rural character. They are well spread out and they are spaced. So there may be a lot of properties looking down from an aerial photograph. But when you're driving along there, it is an area of rural character and an area where the houses are all spaced out, are all dispersed, and they don't read together as a cluster.
Councillor Irvine?
Thanks very much, Darren. The unfortunate thing of this, if you go back to the policy, policy says that all conditions must be ticked. Isn't that correct, Darren?
Yes. Yes.
So it's quite specific. There's no ambiguity, and that is the unfortunate thing. And there are at least two of those, you know, that you can't even do anything about. So we have the policy, we deal in policy, and we have to be consistent. Unfortunately, the sentiment, I think, within the committee may lean towards granting approval because of the circumstances as outlined by the nephew of the two ladies in question. But the unfortunate thing is that we have to reach a policy or work within the policy that we have here. If we can find an exception, we will. If we find something that's material, we'll weigh that up and do that. Unfortunately, there's no leeway here. All the conditions must be ticked for this to actually be approval. And in that case, unfortunately, I will have to go with the officer's recommendation to refuse. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Irvine. And just to advise those connecting remotely, we don't have facility to bring speakers in outside of the allocated time. And we unfortunately have passed that as per our protocol. So we don't have an opportunity to bring back in speakers on behalf of the application. Okay, members, still an opportunity for any questions that you may have for officers at this point. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you very much, Chair. And another interesting application here. And I suppose I take on board what everything has been said here this morning with regard to the nephew of the applicant and also what Councillor Mccann has said in his remarks. I do know this area as well. And I think what Councillor Mccann had said with regard to the community facility, I know where Drumron Hall is. It's very close by. And I know but we have to tick every box within our policy. So that leaves us with a dilemma. And I take on board also the cultural and family connections in the community and the development of the rural community as we move forward in this decade. I would be, I know, I can't see any way how we're going to get around this. Maybe ask Darren as the planning officer, is there any further engagement that can be had with the applicant as to see how we can get this this issue resolved at this stage?
Well, in terms of the planning policy members, these cases are always very difficult, and officers do, you know, there's no pleasure taken from a refusal of planning permission. I can assure you of that. We are, though, trying to be as consistent as we can with everybody. I have spoken to the supporter of the applicant in this application, and I'm happy to do that again to see if there is an avenue to try and get a house under some other policy, for example, to see whether we can, you know, look at farm dwellings or whatever else there is. I understand there may not be anything there. However, officers are more than willing, as we do with every application, to try and assist. We have the new area plan obviously coming out, which does allow for a change in the policy approach. So there may be opportunities when the new plan is published in the future, which applicants, I guess, may be able to benefit from. So, but certainly I'm happy to go back to the applicant and discuss things with them and see if we can do anything to assist.
Well, I thank you, Darren, for your comments. I would certainly encourage that does take place, this discussion. It's in everyone's interest that we try to get this resolved, and that people can come back and live in the countryside where possible. I know we're against it with regard to policy, but I certainly encourage a further discussion and engagement with the applicants concerned. And thank you for that now.
Mr. Robinson?
Councillor Thompson making that a proposal, I'll second that.
Councillor? Councillor Irvine?
Just for clarity, I can understand the sentiment, and I would align myself with that sentiment as well. And I know there will be a slight policy change if the LDP gets through. So there is a slight opening going forward in regard to some issues like this. But Darren, if this application was taken back in, it's under one specific policy. If it is actually then viewed at in regard to a slight policy change, would that mean a reapplication? No?
No, it's described as a new dwelling. So it's an open sort of description, which will allow us to consider any policies. But as I say, members, really, I'm happy to do this, but at the moment, as a planning officer, trying to advise people and advise yourselves, would be a lack of information or lack of any policy, which I would see as being an opportunity at this stage for a new dwelling to be approved here. The new plan, as I say, in the future, I don't know, as the policies you say does tweak, and there may be opportunities there, but certainly today, the approach that officers are giving you is consistent with previous applications.
Look, I'm not averse to coming back, but what you're really saying is you've explored to a certain extent the opportunities available. There may be an opportunity going forward, but really we have the policy, we have to enforce the policy. We could take it back, but it sounds as if there's very little movement in regard to what information was provided unless something completely new falls out of the sky. Look, I'm happy to withdraw it if something comes forward, but we could be sitting with application coming back with exactly the same reasons in maybe a couple of months' time. So,
Okay, I'm just going to ask Paul, wants to make a comment?
Yeah, I suppose, members, just in terms of weighing up, the new LDP is the IE is concluded, and whilst there are some new opportunities for rural dwellings within that, DFI is very much, objected to the additional opportunities, and we have put forward robust evidence to counter that. But look, we'll have to wait on the Commissioner's report and DFI's direction, which may be March 23 by the time that comes through. So for me, I suppose what I would suggest is there's no obvious workaround on this particular application under this particular policy. And you might want to take your decision on this application based on the case officer's report. And then certainly as officers, we'd be content to engage outside of the process again through PAD or whatever it is. They look at other opportunities within the ownership of the applicant that might have different opportunities under different policies. It's just a suggestion. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, members, I suppose we did have that proposal made by Councillor Thompson and seconded by Councillor Robinson. So I assume we're all in agreement if that is needed, and notwithstanding the outcome of our decision today, but if that engagement is needed, we'd be all happy for that engagement. We're all in agreement there with that. Okay. For a month. And was there a proposal to defer for a month? I know that Councillor Irvine had withdrew, maybe, or was willing to withdraw.
Look, I'll amend my recommendation and we'll just defer for a month. My recommendation will be defer for further negotiations in regard to the issues that have been highlighted at the committee. If somebody will second that, it's just for 1 month.
Okay. Seconded by Councillor Rainey, and are we all in agreement? See no indication online to the contrary, so we're all agreed with that. I proposed recess of say 15 minutes, Councillor Irvine, seconded by Councillor Thompson. So we'll come back in 15 minutes time if that's okay. after the recess. We have on our agenda then application, just continuing on with paper B, application number 7, sorry, application number 8, apologies, is LA 10 2021 09140. And we also have speaking rights on this, which I'll call forward at the appropriate junction. I'm going to ask Darren now to introduce the application.
Okay, members. So application 8 then is LA 10 2021 0914. It's an outline application for a proposed domestic dwelling and garage. I just noticed Councillor Irving's not here.
Apologies, we do have one councillor just maybe about to join us, Councillor Irving.
Just check in case. Councillor Mccann. Okay. Yep. Well, there's previous planning history on this site, members. So there's outline planning approval K 2001-0304 approved on the 17th of July 01. And then the reserved matters approved on the 8th of June. So the expiry date for that would be July 2006. And it appears that that has gone past the date without any evidence of being commenced on site. There's no certificate of lawfulness for any works, and a visual inspection would seem to confirm that no work did start on site. So that's the approval then for the reserved matters that was on the site. You can see the access coming in, the laneway down then into where the position of the house is. And as I say, that's the aerial photograph. So there's no evidence really on the ground or anything to seek to demonstrate that the previous approval has commenced, and there's no case being made as far as I'm aware that it is relying on that previous approval. So the site location plan then, you can see the rectangular shape again, members of the site. The agent has submitted supporting information and front-loaded the application with information seeking to demonstrate how the application meets the planning policy. So this is the maps accompanying the application. You can see it's the study area is identified on the right-hand side in the key. And you have the community building, domestic farm, and proposed dwelling. So the application is an application under CTY 2A. It does have a focal point, and you can see the St. McCartans is the focal point then, and then the other buildings nearby. Block plan then shows the position of the intended dwelling and the access then coming on off the public road. And they may not show the quality on the screen, members, but they're online. You can view them online. The site context then shows the images. So you have image 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I'm sure the agent will want to come back to those when they're doing their speaking rights. But they show the views into the site and nearby along the public roads. And then also there's another supporting statement showing the existing buildings then from the other public roads and identify these within the red lines. And again, I'm sure the agent will want to refer to those. The proposed site then is on the blue arrow. So you can see the top slide is over in the far left. And the bottom slide, the proposed dwelling then is the second right one. And then an aerial image showing the location of the site over in the top left. You can see proposed dwelling. And you then have the existing 2 dwellings and the other focal point and adjacent nearby buildings. Those are critical views then, remember. So if you're at the site frontage looking into the site, you can see that's the sort of a view looking in from Google Street View. And then from the frontage again, looking back up the road. That's the view then looking back up the road, and the site then is in on the right. So members will look from the report, it is recommended for refusal for one reason. I'll just take you through. So the reason is contrary to CTY 2A, as there's no cluster of development which appears as a visual entity in the local landscape. The site is not bounded on at least 2 sides with other development, and development of the site cannot be absorbed in the existing cluster through rounding off and consolidation. In terms of the second one there, the site is not bounded on 2 sides. You can clearly see there's about 40 metres to the south and 90 metres to the north to the adjacent buildings. So it's clearly not bounded on at least 2 sides. The cluster then, there are a number of buildings in the area, but they are well spaced out and dispersed along this road and nearby. So they don't appear as a visual entity in the local landscape. And therefore there's no opportunity for rounding off or clustering with those existing buildings. And again, members, just to remind you, the policy is 2A, and it states that permission will be granted for dwelling at the cluster, provided all of the following criteria are met, and the emphasis is on all of the following criteria. As the officers would encourage a consistent approach to this in relation to previous applications that have been before us.
Okay, thank you, Darren. At this point, we're going to have representation by the planning agent, and I welcome Mr. Gary McCartney to speak in support of the application. So, Mr. McCartney, we have 10 minutes for this part of the meeting, and in your own time, if you want to go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. Can you hear me okay?
Here, yeah, thank you.
As you've seen on the drone image that Darren put up, the site is on Reela Road, just south of St. McCartney's Church in Trillick. This proposed site dwelling, it's not a speculative site. It's for a young man from the area who wants to remain in the local village. Number 5, Reela Road, directly north of the site, is the applicant's parents' home. And number 8, just immediately south of the site, belongs to the applicant's uncle, who requires some assistance with day-to-day chores. And the applicant provides great additional support, and this site would allow this care to continue. The applicant also assists with his uncle on the farm on which this site sits and surrounds. So he would obviously like to continue that and remain on this area. There's a high demand for housing in the area due to the shortage. And as highlighted previously, the principle of development was established on the site. It was granted permission in 2002. Unfortunately, the site was not implemented. The reasons for refusal in the planning report note that there is no cluster of development which appears as a visual entity in the landscape. It's not bound on 2 sides, and it cannot be absorbed into the existing cluster through consolidation. The key points that we would like to highlight is that the proposed site dwelling would be acceptable in principle in the countryside, integrate as part of the cluster, and its effect on the area's character, appearance, and neighbours' residential immediately are satisfied. We note that the proposed site would form part of a cluster with the other buildings around the T-junction on the part of the Kilskeary Road running east to west and the branch that leads southwest to Reeler Road. St. McCartan's Catholic Church forms a focal point at this T-junction, and then there are 6 existing dwellings in close proximity to the focal building. 2 dwellings sit east of the church and 2 dwellings to the west and 2 dwellings sit to the south along Reeler Road. The proposed site would be visible when travelling in both directions along the Kilskeary Road and would be seen in the context of the surrounding dwellings, garages, sheds and the main focal building of St. McCartan's Church. And I don't know if Darren can, I think it was slide 30, that had the photographs. Yeah. So when travelling west along the Kilskeary Road, 4 existing dwellings, including the focal building, can be seen along with this new proposed development. Likewise, when travelling east, again, the proposed dwelling site would be read in the context of 4 existing dwellings, 2 of which are along Kilskeary Road, including the focal building, and this site which sits between 2 existing dwellings on the Reeler Road. Therefore, if this site was to be constructed, it would be seen as part of this cluster, which appears as a visual entity on the landscape. The existing boundary definition provides the site with a suitable degree of enclosure, and as noted previously, sits between 2 other existing dwellings, and therefore has development on each side. The pattern and spacing of the building on this site would be consistent of the spacing of the surrounding dwellings, as seen on the drone image around the focal building. With the proposed site sitting between 2 existing dwellings along Reeler Road that form part of the cluster of the 6 grouped around the focal building, this would enhance and therefore consolidate the existing cluster as it appears on the landscape. Any proposed building would be seen in the context of the surrounding dwellings and focal building, with a backdrop of vegetation and topography. In some cases, the proposed dwelling would be partially obscured by the existing planting and trees along the existing site boundary. Any proposed design would present a similar ridge style as per the surrounding dwellings. The scale, form and massing would also reflect that of the surrounding dwellings, so therefore any proposed dwelling would comfortably integrate into the landscape. There are no objections associated with this application, and therefore in summary we would say members should weigh up as to whether a much needed dwelling on this previously approved site will have a detrimental visual impact on the countryside, or whether, as we suggest, it will have a visual and physical linkage to the cluster of dwellings around the focal building of St. McCartan's Church, and as it's sited between existing development, will consolidate the existing cluster, and therefore the reasons for refusal would not stand. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McCartney, for keeping within the time. Is there any questions for the agent at this juncture? Councillor McLahry.
Thank you. Just a couple of small questions. You've said, is there any reason why that house is further set back? It's not clear from the pictures or the topography that we're given. Is there any reason why the house is set so particularly back from the road? You also mentioned farming. Is there any reason precluding from going down the farming line of seeking this application? And third, you mentioned then the care of a relative. I'm taking it that's maybe something that's down the line rather than is particularly at the moment, as you don't appear to have added any. There's no indication of medical evidence at the moment.
Joe?
Yep.
Sorry, just to come back on the point of the siting, it was purely just following the position of the previously approved site. But the red line, I'm sure Darren can have a look, and this house can be sited within that site somewhere. In terms of planning, yes, on farming, the applicant helps out his uncle on the farm. which was the site decided on. And the other house that we're referring to, number 8, his uncle does need some assistance and care with chores daily, which the applicant does help out with at the present, and therefore this site would help continue that care.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Garrity.
Thank you, Chair. I've no questions. Just to thank, I know Gary personally for the report, and it was quite clear and concise report. So I just want to thank him for that, presenting it to us today. Thank you.
Okay, members. Okay, any further questions for the agent at this point? The only opportunity that we have is now. Okay, there's nobody indicating, so in that case, I thank Mr. McCartney for his address in the committee. And I do move on, I move on now to representation by councillors. We have one piece of representation received from Councillor Stephen McCann, which I will read out at this juncture. So Mr. McQuaid has lived in the immediate area of this site his entire life, and there is planning history in relation to this particular site. I believe this application does indeed meet the spirit of what the policy is about. There is a cluster evident in the vicinity of where Mr. McQuaid wants to build, and this is allowed for in the planning policy. The agent has outlined how the cluster is defined in this particular case and how the application fits into the cluster whilst adhering to policy requirements. St. McCartan's Church provides the focal point while numerous homes are located around the focal point in the cluster and do not compromise any amenities in the area. Indeed, Mr. McQuaid's proposed home would integrate well within the area, into the area on a site which has previous approvals. As a local elected representative, I am passionate about supporting young people in setting up home in the country where they can. Our local villages depend on chimney pots. The sustainability of our rural schools, our football clubs, the local economy all depend on people settling in the area. Trillick has seen many young people leave the area over the years, primarily due to not being able to set up home, and there are many negative knock-on effects of this. I firmly believe that where the application fits into the spirit of what the policy is about, we should not be over-restrictive. One can be rigid, interpret the policy in a black and white nature, and show little empathy to an applicant, or we can play our part in building sustainable rural communities and allow our young people to settle where they were born and raised. I hope you will grant approval to Mr. McQuaid today. And that's from Councillor Stephen McCann in support of the applicant. Okay, at this junction, I would invite our officers, planning officers, if they have any comments to make. And Darren?
No members, happy to take questions.
Any questions that people may have? Councillor Maguire.
Just one question on the report that was issued to us. The planning history says none, Darren, but yet you've indicated there is planning history there. Could you update us again, just?
Yeah. Members, after the report was published, I was reviewing the application again, and I have to hands up, it was overlooked by myself, so that's why it was extensive presentation, just going through it all. But the rest of the report, I can assure you, is factually correct.
Thanks for that, Darren. Well, then, would it be correct then that that previous planning application would have been put through the same scrutiny as this application, and would the refusal reasons be the same historically?
No, the previous application was submitted before PPS 21 came in, so it would have been purely just down to a visual issue, which is why, as officers today, we have no issue. The site does visually work. It's the principle under CTY 1 is where the challenges are now with regards to VPS 21.
Okay, Councillor Irving?
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. Just for clarity, Darren, there, you said the issues lie under CTY 1, though the refusal reasons are really CTY 2A.
Yeah. So CTY 1 is the sort of entry policy.
Yeah, that's right.
You go in there and then you sort of go off into the relevant policies that would be applicable. In this case, the applicant's arguing under CTY 2A that it's an application at a cluster. There are other policies there that could be explored because the description is just for a dwelling. And there was reference to farming, so there may be opportunities under other policies in CTY 1 which could be explored.
I think, again, this is like a one we've had before here in regard to issues of clustering. It doesn't tick all the boxes. It may tick some of the other boxes if it was properly explored. And I think in that regard, I think in the event of fairness, I think to everybody coming forward to the committee, and I think we always are fair to people coming forward, we give them a good go. I would propose that we defer this for a month and see if there are any other avenues open to the applicant to actually see if it would fall under another policy and if information could be provided. So it would be deferred for a minimum of a month. And again, I don't like deferring, but I think there are ambiguities here that for the clarity for the applicant, it seems genuine, they need to be sorted out. So that's my proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Could I just?
Whatever, I didn't say a month, sorry,
Oh, no,
whatever.
I was going to suggest, Councillor, given I haven't spoken to the applicant or agent about this application, unlike the last one. So given that, could I suggest that the application is delegated back to officers?
Yes,
which may help speed the
yep, that'll
process
do.
up.
Yep, that's great. Thank you.
Okay.
Happy to include that.
Councillor Garrity.
Yeah, Chair, I would second that. And just by way of information, being local to the area and appreciate the presentation that Gary gave. It is a site which will house a property very nicely and one that's very warranted. I think the applicant, just for information, is son of a lady who works in the council for maybe over 20 years. And this is exactly why we have to, in the spirit of policy, give back to the communities. And if there's something workable, we have to find a way, like Councillor Irvine has said, within the remit of maybe another avenue. So I appreciate the committee for looking like this application and all applications with those eyes, because I think people will thank us for it and we will be thankful for it in the long run. So thank you, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Deehan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you to all involved in presenting this case. I just wanted to say that, Chair, in Darren's consultation with the applicant and agent, if there is any medical evidence that can be provided, because the agent did refer to assistance that the applicant gave to an uncle, if that could be provided as well, as it may be material to our deliberations next time the application comes before the committee. Chair, thank you.
Okay, members, we have a proposal to delegate the application back to officers, proposed by Councillor Irvine, seconded by Councillor Garrity. Are we all in agreement with that? All agreed, yeah? Thank you. I'll ask Darren to sum up.
So members, the recommendation was to refuse permission for the reasons listed in the report, subject to one reason. Members have decided to delegate the application back to officers to review the application again under the scheme of delegation.
Okay, thank you. At this juncture, for the next application, I would take a proposal to go into committee. Councillor Irvine, seconded by Councillor Robinson. Thank you. Just give us a moment. Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Robinson. Just give us a moment while we get everything connected up again. Swear. Oh, yeah. Yep. Okay, we're back in the main meeting. I'm just going to ask him to note the confidential business.
Okay, Chair. So while in confidential business, we considered application 8, Oregon application, and members agreed to grant approval of the application contrary to officer's advice, subject to the provision of a legal agreement, with the legal agreement to be brought back to committee in April. And it was also agreed during confidential business on the proposal of Councillor Thompson to write to DFI regarding the issues raised in relation to the removal of the variation condition.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Kim. Can we have a proposal and second of that note? Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Deehan. And moving on to correspondence then. We have 3 items of correspondence. So the first for noting is the Department for Communities implications for Planning Committee decision making in light of judgment in Heartlands NI Limited. I would take a proposal to note, maybe. Councillor Thompson.
Propose to note, Chair.
Councillor Robinson. Okay. And the second one is NI Water annual waste water treatment works update for the Fermanagh and Omagh District Council area. And to bring Paul in just to comment on that.
Thanks, Chair. Members, I suppose it's just a quick comment that this is the annual report from NI Water just in relation to wastewater treatment capacities. And the officers, we've only received this last week. So we'll work through a review and we'll present that to a future committee meeting sometime in April, hopefully. Thanks.
Okay, proposal note. Councillor Deehan, seconded by Councillor Thompson. And the last item of correspondence then is from Department for Infrastructure, LA 10 2019 1392F. That's lands of former Unipork site in Enniskillen. And any proposal to note there? Councillor Robinson and Councillor Maguire.
Margaret Carley, thanks, Chair, and I'd just like to welcome the letter in second the noting. It's been quite a while coming, but I'm delighted with the outcome so far, so we look forward to proceeding. Margaret, Chair.
Okay, that's seconded. And there is no other correspondence. Item 5 is any other relevant business. Councillor Deehan.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm not sure if you received my email earlier this morning just about this item of AOB. And thank you for letting me come in on this, Chair. I was absolutely delighted, Chair, to note the success of Loreto Grammar School in Omagh in winning the ladies Gaelic football under 16 All Ireland final for the Group B. Loreto Grammar School takes feeder pupils from many primary schools throughout the Omagh area. And this is a magnificent achievement by the school. It's great to see all these young girls so committed to their Gaelic football, playing for their school, playing for their clubs. And because it's an All-Ireland title, I would be grateful, Chair, if we could request that the council chair would host a reception for this team, please. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Deehan. And Councillor McAduff.
Just want to support Councillor Deehan in her proposal, and she said it all there. Great achievement. Thank you.
Absolutely. And Councillor Thompson.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And I've heard the proposal by Councillor Deehan, seconded by Councillor McAduff. And it is indeed a great achievement, and I am prepared to look at it for a reception at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. And we're all in agreement, a fantastic achievement and an opportunity for a number of clubs, including Dromore, who had 4 members of the panel to celebrate. So we welcome these opportunities when several clubs, including the school, can celebrate simultaneously. Okay, Councillor Garrity.
Thank you, Chair. But if we're going to mention Dromore, the manager was a Trillick lady, so congratulations to the lady.
Absolutely. Congratulations to everyone involved. Thank you, Councillor. Okay, there have been no other business that I've been informed of. I thank everyone for their attendance at this and the previous meeting. So it's been a busy March agenda, but I thank everyone and I thank our officers and indeed our